call the hearing board in order. And it's also that someone moved that the Long Point Regional Board of Directors now sit as a hearing. Moved by Michael, seconded by Tom. All those in favor? That motion is carried with no objection. Nicole, will you read the roll call, please?
Shelley Ann Bentley. Yes. Dave Bears.
Here.
Doug Brunton.
Here.
Michael Columbus.
Here.
Thomas Shelley.
Here.
Jim Palmer.
Here.
Stuart Patterson.
Present.
Chris Van Hassett.
Here.
Rainey Weisler has sent her regrets. Peter Yitma.
Here.
And Robert Chambers.
I'm here. Next, there is a provision for the declaration of community interest. We have two hearings. If you have a declaration for the first hearing, you can declare now. And we'll begin the second hearing. You can declare at that time. You have a hearing just for that. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a situation that could be construed as conflict, so I will recuse myself from this hearing.
That's the first hearing.
That's correct.
Okay, the record will note that Peter has declared he will not be taking part in the first hearing. And I have to deviate a little bit from procedure. Unfortunately, I have to take care of some business at some point in the next little while. I'm going to ask the vice chair, Dave Barris, if he will chair the hearing board's meetings. And in order to do that, I would like a motion to appoint the vice chairman of the board, Dave Barris, as the acting chairman for the hearings this evening. And that's moved by Jim, seconded by Doug. All those in favor? That motion is carried with no objections. And I'm going to excuse myself. I have to make a few phone calls, unfortunately. That there's a pressing matter. So Dave, you are now in charge of the meeting.
Thank you very much for that. Something that was missed here. This hearing is being recorded. It will be posted to the YouTube channel at a later date. The agenda reads the chair's opening remarks, and I'm going to ask Nicole if she would narrate the opening remarks. We have the board needs. We have the board.
So we are now going to conduct a hearing under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act in respect to an application by Tilsonburg Development for permission to construct residential structures at 2, 4, and 6 Greenhill Drive, Tilsonburg, in Oxford County. The authority administers Ontario Regulation 4124 under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act, which requires the permission of the authority for development within an area regulated by the authority in order to ensure no adverse effect on the control of flooding, erosion, dynamic beaches, or unstable slope or bedrock, or to permit alteration to watercourse or interference with wetland. The staff has reviewed this proposed work, and a copy of the staff report has been given to the applicant and the board. Applicant was invited to file material in response to the staff report. However, no material was provided by the applicant. The Conservation Authorities Act, Section 28(5) provides that an authority shall not refuse an application for a permit or attach conditions to a permit unless the applicant for the permit has been given an opportunity to be heard by the authority. In holding this hearing, the authority board is to determine whether or not a permit is to be issued with or without conditions. In doing so, we can only consider the application in the form that is before us. The staff report, such evidence as may be given, and the submissions to be made on behalf of the applicant. Only information disclosed prior to the hearing is to be presented at the hearing. The proceedings will be conducted according to the Statutory Powers Procedure Act. Under Section 5 of the Canada Evidence Act, a witness may refuse to answer any question on the ground the answer may tend to incriminate a person or may tend to establish his or her liability to a civil proceeding at the instance of the Crown and person. The procedure in general shall be informal without the evidence for it being given under oath or application. As the hearing proceeds, the procedures listed in the hearing procedure summary provided may be relaxed or abbreviated for efficiency. The authority may ask questions of witnesses for clarification at any time. If the applicant has any questions to ask of the hearing board or the authority representative, they must be directed to the chair of the board.
Thank you, Nicole. One point regional conservation authority staff, so we're now gonna have Leanne to make the introductions and then proceed with her presentation.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to introduce, there's three people here tonight from Bertelsenberg Development. I'm just going to introduce Dave Rowe, and then questions arise that require other input. You have two other people here that can just help answer those questions. So Dave Rowe will be here as the agent, acting on behalf of the applicants. All right, so an application has been deemed complete for the construction of 3 townhouses, the associated grading, which includes reconfiguring the south slope. LPRCA staff are unable to recommend approval of this application. The subject lands known municipally as 2, 4, and 6 Green Hill Drive in Tillsonburg. The subject lands used to be part of a golf course and is now being converted into a planned subdivision for residential development. The image here is showing that a portion of the property is regulated under Ontario 3124, as it contains the valley lands associated with Stony Creek. The limit of the regulation has been shown here in red. The diagram here explains, and gives you a visual of the riverine erosion hazard, and illustrates kind of what aspects of the riverine erosion hazard are regulated. So it includes the water course, the stable slope allowance, and then also an allowance on the bank. The subject property is outlined in yellow on the site plan, and the applicants are proposing 3 townhouses. The next couple slides are just showing, this next slide is just showing the proposed exterior diagrams of the proposed structure. There's additional information in your agenda package just to kind of give you a better idea of what they're proposing to build. So on the top is the view from the street, and then the rear elevation, of course, is from the rear yard. So this site plan was prepared and submitted to us, and I've kind of this was the information that they gave to us. So a slope stability assessment was completed for the site, and the findings are shown on the site plan. The purple line shows the stable slope setback. The red line shows the erosion hazard. A portion of the proposed deck for the northern townhouse is being proposed within the stable slope allowance, which is the portion of the slope that is deemed to be unstable. And a portion of the proposed dwelling is being proposed to be within the erosion hazard limit, which has been defined as 6 meters from the stable top of bank. The applicants are proposing to reconfigure the slope on the south, and therefore the dashed green line is showing the proposed new erosion hazard limit. Without reconfiguring the slope, a small portion of the proposed deck on a southern townhouse is being proposed within the 6 meter setback from the stable top of bank. So here I've highlighted a couple areas of concern. So staff have identified first, this is a cross section that has been provided, and I tried to make it as clear as possible. But the first one is, this is for the north dwelling. The northern townhouse is proposed to be within the stable slope allowance from the erosion hazard limit. The adjacent slope is approximately 4.5 meters in height, or 14 feet. The public walking trail is at the base of the slope. LPRCA policies do not allow for a new dwelling to be built within the unstable portion of the slope or within the 6 meter allowance. Section 8.2.7 of our policy document does allow for new structures within the regulated area in accordance with section 822. However, the minimum setback of 6 meters from stable top of bank is to be maintained in addition to appropriate engineering. Staff do note that the proposed footing of the structure will be placed below the stable slope inclination. However, LPRCA reviews where the stable slope inclination intercepts with the ground, and the 6 meter minimum setback is calculated from there. The 6 meter setback, kind of what I wanted to highlight is the reasons why we have it. So it's for providing protection against unforeseen or predicted external conditions, which could have an adverse effect on the natural conditions or processes acting on or within the erosion prone area of interest. The erosion access allowance also ensures that fill placement, grading, and development stay back from the top of slope, and an erosion access allowance cannot be waived and must be provided, although it can be adjusted to account for local conditions. The second area of concern that staff have highlighted is the proposed south dwelling. So this is the section where the components are proposing to fill the top of slope to expand the building area. LPRCA staff generally do not support filling the slope as it can cause instability in the slope. LPRCA staff utilize guidance from the province in order to make decisions regarding policy to administer Ontario Regulation 4124. As per the technical guide for river and stream systems erosion hazard limits, slope instability can occur in many ways, but is generally the result of 1, changes in slope configuration, such as steepness or inclination. 2, increase in loading or on or near the slope, such as flowing structures. 3, changes in groundwater conditions or drainage of the soil. 4, loss of vegetation cover and root systems. 5, erosion of the slope toe. The applicants are proposing to carry out work that fall under 2 of the categories mentioned above. 1 is changing of the slope configuration and increasing loading forces on or near the slope, including the dwelling and the attached deck. Therefore, in summary, LPRCA staff cannot support the application as is. It is proposing to place fill on the slope to accommodate new development and is proposing new development within the unstable portion of the slope and within the minimum setback. The overall guidance and intent of our policies are to minimize potential risk and life and property during natural hazard events, which includes the stability of slopes. And for that reason, LPRC staff put together a proposed recommendation for the board's consideration of refusal for the following reasons.
Great. Thank you, Leanne. And now I'm going to, before questions and answers, I'll call on the applicant or the agent. So, Mr. Rowe. If you would identify yourself.
Yes, good evening. Dave Rowe, the agent for the applicant to Tillsonburg Developments Limited. And I have with us Alex, yes, right. I knew that Alex and Andrew. So from CJDL, our engineer on this particular project. The consultants that have been dealing with the whole permit process in the engineering plans, as well as the engineering plans for the subdivision.
I'll just speak briefly to Leanne's presentation earlier. I'm not sure if it's possible to go back a few slides to the cross sections. One more, yeah, that one. So this is on the north side, as Leanne referenced. The main item that was discussed was the stable slope limit there, which is the purple line, is hard to see on the screen there. That purple line is determined from the geotechnical engineer. They do soil testing and they look at the existing slope to see how stable they believe it to be. And then they apply a factor of safety onto the true critical slope line to come up with what they call the stable slope line. Any building founded below the stable slope line would be on stable soils, which is what we've tried to demonstrate with this cross section, that the deck footings would be below this line. And we have confirmed this with the geotechnical engineer that they are in agreement with that review. As Leanne had mentioned, this is within the 6 meter setback from the original stable slope limit. The slope here is 4.5 meters tall, and as it moves further to the north, which is towards Baldwin Street, if you know the area, the slope gets smaller and smaller as it comes to grade with Baldwin Street. If you could go to the next slide on the south, that would be wonderful. Thank you. The south slope, the purple line, it might look odd on this section, but the stable slope line is actually steeper than the grade itself, which just means that the slope is actually flatter than the stable slope limit. And what we're proposing to do is at a point about midway down the slope, from that point on, carry the grade at, again, flatter than the stable slope limit, up to the top to create a new top of bank that would be at least 6 meters off the proposed building envelope to allow for that 6 meter setback on that side. If you have any questions regarding that, feel free to let me know.
Is that complete your application or your presentation?
Yeah.
That's okay. Then what I'm gonna do, I'll ask staff if they have any questions for the applicant or the agent.
I have a question.
No questions, thank you. No, I'll ask the applicant or the agent if they have any questions for the Conservation Authority staff. No, further than your presentation, okay. And then I'll ask the board members if they have any questions for either staff or the applicant or the agent. Mr. Columbus.
Yeah, how far is the unstable slope from the Stony Creek? How far away is Stony Creek from?
Stony Creek itself, I would say, is probably somewhere between 50 to 100 meters away. It's on the other side of Borden Crescent from this development. The regulation area that the Conservation Authority regulates is from Stony Creek and then out beyond the flood limits, and then as Leanne had shown, the slope limits and there beyond.
Okay, I thought it was closer. Thanks.
It's quite a distance.
Mr. Rudd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question is, this creek, you say it's up for, is there any record of the high water mark for that creek?
I'm not sure if Leanne knows what the high water level is. This slope, Borden Crescent itself, I believe, sits, I want to say, between 5 meters above the creek level, and then this slope is higher than that yet. From that point.
But I'm looking for a geodetic elevation. I'm looking at all these elevations on here. I just wondered if there's one for a high water mark. No.
I'm not sure, Leanne, if you know what the high water mark is. Stony Creek.
Through the chair, we don't have any high water marks at this location. Usually that's used along shorelines of the Great Lakes, but we do have floodplain mapping at this location. I have it on my computer. I could pull it up. I just didn't, it's not a flooding concern, which is why I did not address it in my presentation, but this property is well above 100-year flood elevation.
So as far as the creek causing erosion, that's not an issue. So he says 100 meters away, 150 meters away.
There would have to be significant erosion of the water course to affect this slope. What we're looking at here is the slope itself.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barr.
Yes, thank you. What kind of soil we're dealing with here?
Here it's silty clay.
Silty clay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, what we're going to do then, we're going to move into closed session. We're going to ask you to step out of the room. I'll need a mover and a seconder to move into closed session. That's showing yeah. And a seconder, second. Chris, thank you. All in favor? And then it's carried. We're now in closed session. Back in open session. Pleased to announce, we wish to advise the Tilsonburg Development Incorporated that the request has been reached.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We are now entering the second hearing, and going to conduct a hearing Gulch, and I have you again to narrate the structure.
You're now going to conduct a hearing under section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act in respect to an application by Mark Butler for the permission to construct a proposed garage with additional dwelling unit at 35 Douglas Street, Fort Dover, Norfolk County. The authority administers under Resolution 4124 under section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act, which requires the permission of the authority for development within an area regulated by the authority in order to ensure no adverse effect of the control of flooding, erosion, dam, beaches, or unstable slope, or bedrock, or to permit operations to water course or interference with the land. The staff has reviewed this proposed work, and a copy of the staff report has been given to the applicant and the board. Applicants are invited to file material in response to the staff report, a copy of which has also been provided to the board. The Conservation Authorities Act, section 28, provides that an authority shall not refuse an application for a permit or attach conditions to a permit unless the applicant for the permit has been given an opportunity to be heard by the authority. In holding this hearing, the authority board is to determine whether or not a permit is to be issued with or without conditions. In doing so, we can only consider the application in the form that is before us. The staff report, such evidence as may be given, and the submissions to be made on behalf of the applicant, and the information disclosed prior to the hearing if you presented at hearing. The proceedings will be conducted according to the Statutory Powers Procedures Act. Under Section 5 of the Canada Evidence Act, a witness may refuse to answer any question on the ground that the answer may tend to incriminate the person or may tend to establish his or her liability to a civil proceeding at the instance of the Crown or of each person. The procedure in general shall be informal without the evidence before it being given under oath or affirmation. As hearing proceeds, the procedures listed in the hearing procedure summary provided may be relaxed or be evaded for efficiency. The authority may ask questions of witnesses for clarification at any time. If the applicant has any questions to ask of the hearing board or of the authority representative, they must be directed to the chair of the board.
Thank you, Nicole. Now I'll ask Leanne to make the introductions and then proceed with her presentation.
Right, so for tonight, for this application, and I apologize, I do have the number wrong. It is 187. It's apologies. It's application 187 and 24 for Mark Leffler, and Justin Masker is here tonight as the agent for the. So an application has been deemed complete for the construction of an additional dwelling unit, including an attached garage, associated grading and landscaping at 35 Douglas Street in Fort Dover. The subject lands are known municipally as 35 Douglas Street in Fort Dover. The approximate boundary is outlined in yellow. The lands contain an existing dwelling and is generally surrounded by other dwellings in Black Beaches to the north. At this location, 35 Douglas Street, the property is subject to erosion and flooding related hazards from Black Creek, and the entire property is regulated under Ontario Regulation 4124. The limit of the regulation area is shown in red on your map. For here, the riverine erosion hazard as it applies to the property is shown above. So the property is located within the valley of Black Creek. So again, this is demonstrated the erosion hazard limits related to the riverine. The next slide is the riverine flood hazard as the portion of the property is within the 100-year floodplain of Black Creek. So above is the site plan that was submitted. The proposed garage and ADU is outlined in red. The proposed landscaping is outlined in blue, and the proposed staircase down to the slope is outlined in purple. And the approximate footprint of the existing dwelling is outlined in green. The application is proposing a garage with an ADU up top and stairs down the slope and landscaping to the north side of the proposed structure. Again, here are some drawings to give you visualization of what the proposed structure will look like. This is on page 58 of your agenda package, just so you have a bit of a clearer view. So as you can see, from Douglas Street, there's going to be the two garage doors with the unit above, and facing Black Creek is on the right. And you can kind of get a view from what this proposed structure would look like from the creek. Again, kind of the same views, just a little bit more of the building details. So this is on page 61 of your agenda package to review. And again, the sides, as you can see, they're looking to build into the slope. And this is on page 62 and 63 of your agenda package. I included the floor plan for the second story, which is proposed to be the additional dwelling unit. This is on page 60 of your agenda package. And so for this site plan, so this is the same site plan that I showed earlier, but it now includes the approximate location of the 100-year floodplain in yellow. And this is page 79 of your agenda package. So there's been a little bit of back and forth today between the agent, Justin, and myself, because I just confirmed with the surveyor, there's two different vertical datums that get used in our watershed. And the difference between the two of them is about 70 or 45 centimeters. So depending on what datum is used, it makes a big difference in what the floodplain elevation is. So Justin had believed the floodplain was in a different location than what staff had looked at. And so after we had that conversation today, he went through the topo survey, and we're thinking it's kind of somewhere in the middle. So the yellow line that I have that shows the 100-year floodplain, I did put approximate because we didn't have it on the survey. And so the information that Justin has looked up today is showing it is probably a little bit further to the north, but not to the full extent that was submitted in the material that was received prior in the agenda package prior to today. So I just want to make that clarification that it's somewhere in the middle, but it is the elevation of 176.26 on the survey. So anyways, just clarifying that. So the area of concern that one of the areas of concern that LPRCA staff is that the portion of the proposed structure, landscaping components, including the stairs, are proposed within the 100-year floodplain. In this location, the depths of flooding reach 0.8 meters and the velocities are approximately 0.44 meters per second. Based on an assessment by our technical staff, they believe this portion of the floodplain may be part of the hydraulic floodway, which is meant to be preserved to avoid increasing upstream and downstream flood levels. The results of increasing upstream and downstream flood levels can have many negative effects on the surrounding structures, including many dwellings, which are already subject to flooding. LPRCA staff believe that the approval of this application will lead to subsequent applications and will have a negative cumulative effect on the area if approved. The floodplain of Black Creek falls into LPRCA's one zone policy, which does not allow for new units within the floodplain or filling of the floodplain to create new units. Second area of concern is the structure is proposed to be located within the slope adjacent to Black Creek. The slope is approximately 6 meters high from Black Creek to Douglas Street. The slope continues towards Grand Street to the south. This profile that I drew, I did take the topographic information that we have from our LiDAR, plotted it, just to kind of give you an idea of what the slope looks like, and a bit of to scale the proposed building, the location of the floodplain, and the landscaping wall. LPRCA cannot support a new unit on the slope, irrespective of engineering efforts. Our policies do not allow for a new unit to be built on the slope or by cutting into the slope. In summary, staff cannot recommend approval of this application as it is placing a new dwelling on a slope and cutting into the slope to accommodate the structure. Staff can also not support the development as proposing to fill in a portion of the floodplain of Black Creek. Your overall guidance and intent of our policies are to minimize potential risk to life and property during natural hazard events. Therefore, LPRCA staff are recommending refusal of this application for the reasons that are located on the slide and also in the staff report. We end my presentation.
Thank you for that. Now I'll ask the applicant, if you'd like to step forward. To identify yourself and, make your presentation.
My name is Justin Massacre. I'm the designer for the project and the agent for Mark Leffler. And so it's mostly what Leanne, stated all the facts of everything. So that's mostly all there succinct. But basically, the general intent of the development was to create an additional housing unit for Mark Leffler's son. He's got some development issues that basically mean that like long term he won't be able to like live kind of away from his parents. So that's the purpose of the development. So basically it's got to be close to him. And then from a technical aspect, basically the intent was to try to stay out of that, to keep the building out of that floodplain. That's where there's that bit of discrepancy on where that line actually is. So I know one thing in talking to Lane earlier, we could probably get surveyor to show that line, that exact contour, so that we know exactly where that is to kind of provide that clarity. And then the other just technical element to discuss is that we did engage Peter McCallum, geotechnical engineers, to discuss the project and discuss the suitability of getting some geotechnical engineering for it. Before going ahead to spend that money, we did talk to them and they did say that it was worth proceeding. It looked like it would prove to be stable and prove to be a safe development. So I guess the crux of the issue is we're looking for an application to be approved with the condition that we go get that engineering, because we know the engineering likely is going to work out. It's worth spending that money on that engineering. And primarily the other items that I wanted to make a comment about, or I guess ask a question for staff actually is, would there be any minor elements ever permitted within a floodplain?
That's a great question, but we're following the process and I'm gonna ask you.
Oh, my apologies.
If you're asked that, you should.
Yeah, my apologies.
No, that's fine. We'll continue with your presentation.
And just lastly, the third point there, about the motion, we're proposing that satisfactory report by Peter McCallum would show that there's no risk from the erosion of the slope. And yeah, that's about all I have. We're just looking to review the application on the technical merits, having somebody like a good geotechnical engineer to take a look at it. That concludes my presentation.
Just stay there for a moment. Thank you for your presentation. We'll ask now if staff has any questions for the applicant.
No, I do not.
Right. And now is a good time for the applicant or agent if they have any questions for staff.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Leanne, are there ever any minor elements permitted within a floodplain?
So we look at everything on a case by case basis. So yes, there can be what we consider minor landscaping, if you will, floodplains. Our policies are pretty detailed when it goes into adding additions. So of course we have to recognize that there is existing development in floodplains. One thing that is prohibited though is new units. So if someone already had an existing area, they're allowed to do certain things, provided they're outside of what we could deem to be frequently flooded, which means within the 25-year return period of the flood. So I guess the answer to that is yes, sometimes not new units.
Thank you. That's all my
Questions? Okay, thank you. And then we're gonna ask the board if they have any questions for either the staff or the applicant for the agent. Mr. Columbus.
I've got a question for Leanne. And I'm looking at page 80. It's the areas of concern diagram. And it talks about proposed filling of the floodplain. The yellow hatched area. And you didn't talk about it very much. You gave me the talk, as you noticed anyway. How much fill is actually supposed to go in? On page 80.
Yeah, so I didn't look at the proposed square area of it. There is a drawing that shows the retaining wall. And I hope I put it in here. Let me see if I can find it quickly. With you, Mr. Sprite, what's going in here. Yeah, so basically, as you can see on page 75, there is a section that shows the rear perspective. So the section that says facing Black Creek, and basically what's being proposed is you can kind of see the top of that retaining wall. So there's going to be a retaining wall that comes from the ground up. That provides kind of a flat area and then into the lower part of the structure. And then it also includes the stairs that go down the bank as well. So those are the areas that are being proposed.
Thank you.
Further questions, Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one question for staff and one question for the applicant. The first question is staff, Leanne, do I understand from your report then that you would not support this structure regardless of its location on this property?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, could you reiterate, like if it was moved out of the floodplain, i.e. moved further toward Douglas Street, what makes that still unacceptable?
It is against our policies to allow for new units within the slope. So generally speaking, we do not allow for new units to be built on a slope that's associated with the valley wall, Black Creek.
Thank you. Question to the applicant now.
Sure.
On page 85 of our agenda package, it's part of your report to the board. The bottom paragraph says we ask the board to approve the application given a small area of floodplain we are occupying. If this is not possible, we can resubmit an application with no portion of the structure within the floodplain, which should render this point moot. If it's possible to move this structure out of the floodplain with the associated landscaping, why was that not submitted to start with? And would you consider to move the entire structure out of the floodplain, including the landscaping area?
Through your chair to answer your question. So it was upon direction of the client that wanted the retaining wall structure and stairs in that location. Even though we were aware that that portion was in the floodplain. As Leanne alluded to earlier, we actually think based on the geodetic elevation of the 176.26, that the structure, the building itself is actually outside of the floodplain, like just right on the edge of it. So that's where we suggested maybe a condition or something is just getting that shown on the survey so that it can be very clear as to where that line is. Because the intent was that the building itself would be out of the floodplain, and we were relying on, I guess, interpretation that the retaining wall area with a planter and the stairs and for accessing the door at the back of the basement of the unit, which is just like a unfinished concrete kind of storage area for his lawn furniture, stuff like that. We're hoping that would be considered minor element and not a major concern, because our intent was that the building actually is out of the floodplain.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks for that explanation. So then, just to be clear, the lower level of the proposed structure, there is no proposed boat well or anything like that in there?
Through your chair to answer your question, no, nothing. It's just an empty concrete room. Like I said, just for storage.
And so then when I look at the drawings that you've provided and that staff have provided, it looks to me like you're trying to square up the creek side face of the proposed structure with the current residential unit that's on site. But if you were to move it further towards the street, you could equally square it up with the street facing wall of the existing structure. And so I'm just wondering if that would be too much of a task to shift it further back away from the creek in order to get the landscaping and the retaining wall out of the floodplain area as well.
Through your chair to answer the question, that's a good question. The main actual reason for the location of it being set back where it is, we can't move it any further forward due to, and I kind of wish we had maybe a plan that showed the street, like Douglas Street itself and where this house is positioned. You can't actually get a pickup truck turn radius into the garage if it's set any further forward. So we actually did the setback based on turning radius of the client's Toyota Tundra, so he could get it in the garage. So we do it any further forward, it won't be able to make the turn. It would actually hit the neighbor's retaining wall that they have at the bottom of their hill on the opposite side of Douglas Street.
And it wouldn't be an option to have a secondary driveway?
No, there's not any space left at all on the property.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hill. Did you have, Bill Best?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask the agent, where does Douglas Street end? Does it end at the western quarter of the property?
Through your chair, answer your question, Mr. Manpassen, that's good question. The owner recently purchased that end of Douglas Street.
I do believe the county closed it and sold it to them.
Yeah,
So this is the limit, that's no longer the street in front, that's the chart of the lot.
right. I don't know what his rights are in terms of access or anything like that. Like if it's if he can actually use that space or not. Yeah,
I sold it to him, it's become part of the lot.
it's part of the lot. Okay.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leanne, you mentioned in your presentation that the 176.26, there's a discrepancy on that, and I heard it again here from the applicant. I'm confused with that.
Okay, it is a little confusing. So there are two different datums. So they're vertical datums that are used by engineers and land surveyors. And the difference between the two of them is 45 centimeters in our watershed. So we have elevations of the floodplain. So there's no discrepancy in what the floodplain elevations are. We provide them to applicants and we provide them both datums. It just depends on what surveyor they're using. Some use the newer stuff, some use the older stuff. So when we were preparing our response, we had used the correct datum. And then just through when I was looking at the information that Justin had prepared, he was using the other datum. So it's the right elevation. You just have to use it in the correct datum.
So he's saying it's out of the floodplain, am I correct? Isn't that what you said? Is that the new stuff being LiDAR? Is that what we're saying?
No, so they did a topographic survey, but they did not on the 100-year flood elevation. So when we reviewed it, we looked at the points that were provided on the plan. And then when Justin was looking at it, he pulled up the actual topographic survey and the points. So when I was looking at it, I was looking at it in the correct datum, and Justin made an assumption that it was in the 2013 datum. I think that's a fair. Yeah,
That's correct.
Yeah. So when he provided his response, he was assuming it was in a different datum. So where's the line? So the line is in between the two that we provided. But we'd have to have the surveyor go out and plot that based on the actual pointer in the correct data. So the structure, there is a little bit of discrepancy whether or not the actual structure itself is proposed to be filling in the floodplain, but I think we can both agree that the landscaping and the stairs is within the floodplain.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any further questions, Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, thanks. Just one quick question. Is there an existing structure on that property?
through your chair to answer the question. There is an existing house on the property, adjacent to this proposal. That's the residence of the property owner right now. This is an additional development property.
So I've been down for a few weeks, so that's not the property. Like there's a new build there, it's a lot of landscaping going on.
No, that's not that's further down the road. This is the very end of the street.
Further questions from members? It's Bailey.
So, I'm sorry, for clarification, this would be a secondary dwelling. And what's the lot size of the whole property?
Your chair to answer the question, I don't actually have the size of the lot in front of me, but it is a secondary dwelling. We do have to apply to the county for either a minor variance or a rezoning for the lot coverage and height. But we have had preliminary conversations with planning department, and they're inclined to approve it based on like kind of support a variance or a rezoning based on like the intended use is housing. And the other issue is because the constraints of the lot, and for them to still need to provide that parking in the garage space, we have to go higher than required because we have to put the ADU on top of the parking basically.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none. All right, we're going to go into closed session. We'll ask you to step outside for a moment. So I'm looking for a motion to move into closed session in from Mr. Patterson and Engineer Button. And I have a motion for the hearing board to move into closed session. The LPRCA hearing board does now enter into closed session to discuss litigation. Actually, I'm ahead of myself, which should call favor. That's carried. The LPRCA hearing board does now enter into closed session to discuss litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals. Example, local planning appeal tribunal affecting the authority. So, back in open session. Mark, I'm somewhat pleased to announce that the board of directors grants the prohibited activities exemption with some conditions. And the conditions are, we would like to see an engineered slope stability assessment and also a geodetic survey, and that's spelled GEODETIC. What discussion on what that is, and that covers what this board has come up with. So those are the conditions with those presented. Okay, for your time. Good. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thanks.
Tell me.
And now I need a motion that the LPRC board of directors now adjourns from sitting as a hearing. Mike and Charlie here. All in favor? Carried.